The topic of this video is the function and treatment of challenge and behavior. The treatment of challenge and behavior is based on this concept of function-based thinking. And function-based thinking is the concept of thinking about a challenge and behavior from the perspective of your student and asking yourself the question, what does the student get out of their challenge and behavior that is a positive from their perspective? Some examples of challenge and behavior. In the vocational settings in which you're working, you're most likely to see challenge and behavior such as talking out of turn. You might encounter a student that wants to answer every question that that you ask your class. You may see some non-compliance or reluctance to engage in academic or other activities. They may have some negative interaction towards peers. And in the case of some of the students, particularly students with autism spectrum disorders, you may notice a lot of stereotypic or repetitive behaviors. So the student might fidget with a lot of things, get up, pace around the room. What is the concept of function-based thinking? It's what you do to be preventative, to avoid the need for additional consultation or support, or the development of a behavioral intervention plan. So why do we consider function-based thinking to be important? First of all, there's information that suggests that it's more effective than common sort of classroom discipline or management strategy. So a common strategy might be if a student is disruptive in class, send them out of class to take a break for a period of time. Maybe in some cases, asking other people help support the students, like their parents, asking them to go home early, those sorts of things. Function-based thinking allows your class to run more efficiently, and it increases the likelihood that all the students in your class will have a positive experience. What are the assumptions of challenging behaviors that we make in this approach? Well, first of all, one of the main ones is that disruptive or challenging behaviors are learned in one lifetime. And we're optimistic. So we believe if you've learned to display particular behaviors because you get something out of them, you can also learn not to display those behaviors or a better alternative behavior to the challenging behavior. We believe that, biology medical conditions can increase the likelihood of challenging behavior. So if you have a lot of anxiety, you may be more likely to display repetitive or stereotypical behavior. We also believe that challenging behaviors have a purpose and that they don't come out of the blue, and that it's our job to identify the purpose of a challenging behavior from the perspective of the student. It's important to couple definitional terms, a couple terms that's important to know something about. The first term is positive reinforcement. And that's just the concept if you display a behavior and it's followed by a particular consequence consistently, and that consequence is viewed as positive from your perspective, you're going to be more likely to display the behavior. Then there's negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement requires you to be in a situation you find aversive, uncomfortable, something you want to get out of. And if the behavior successfully allows you to avoid or terminate participating in that activity, That's the concept of negative reinforcement. So in the future, you're in the same situation that you don't like, you're going to be likely to display the behavior, the challenging behavior again, because it's worked in the past. What are the common identified functions of challenging behavior? So there's evidence, a lot of evidence, that challenging behaviors can be maintained by attention. So I might call out in class, tell jokes because my peers respond, they laugh. They might even, tell me to be quiet. And I really enjoy the attention I get. That makes a lot of sense. I think in certain situations, we really all very much enjoy the attention from other people. Escape or avoidance behavior, again, it's the concept of there's a situation you do not like being in, and you display a behavior because it allows you to either delay having to do a task or it gets you out of the activity entirely. Sometimes challenging behaviors are maintained because they allow you to gain access to a preferred item or activity. So this one, sometimes it's helpful to think about the behavior of a child, say in a grocery store. Child has a temper tantrum. Lots of people are watching. Parents are embarrassed. So they decide they want to do something to redirect, calm their child down. So they give them, some cookies, might give them some candy to eat. And in the similar situation in the future, and the child really likes cookies and candy, what are they likely to do to gain access to it? Display another temper tantrum. If that's behavior's been, if that behavior has produced positive consequences from their perspective in the past. And then there's the concept of automatic reinforcement, which is I engage in the behavior because there's something I find enjoyable or pleasurable it produces. So it really doesn't matter how people interacted with me or how people respond. I do it because it feels really good. The steps of function based thinking is spending some time thinking about the situation. What are the things that the child consistently does? Under what circumstances? And what is the response or the positive thing from their perspective they may be getting out of the display of challenge and behavior? Some key questions for you to consider. Got have a couple cartoons next that illustrates this concept. It's really important when you think about the function or purpose of challenge and behavior. You consider it as a two-party interaction. So in the case of you in your classroom, it could be you and the student, it could be you, the student and a peer, it could be the student and everyone in the immediate surroundings, so everyone in the classroom. And what this illustrates is, you think about, working with your pet, you could argue it's the classic question of who's trained whom. So, I might train my dog, but from my dog's perspective, they may have trained me very well. So they become very efficient at getting the things uh, that they find positive. So their behavior, it's a learned relationship. Another example would be the classic of example of a child that gets up in the middle of the night, gets into bed with their parents. Parents let the child get in bed with them because it allows them to go back to sleep. It allows them to avoid being tired in the morning. But from the perspective of the child, it's like, wow, this worked really well. And I'm not alone. It's warmer and more comfortable in bed with mom and dad. Next time they wake up in the middle of the night, the child, what are they likely to do? Go and get in bed with mom and dad. Because from their perspective, it's a big positive, a big win. So a little bit on what you can do once you've identified the function or purpose of challenge and behavior. So the first thing is if you say the behaviors escape or avoidance, consider, can you revise the curriculum, the work you're asking the student to do, to make it less unpleasant or aversive from their perspective? So example here might be a student may have very poor fine motor skills. They hate to write. If they hate to write, they might try to get out of the activity, or any activity that requires them to write a lot. Uh, so can they provide a verbal response? Can you develop a visual that can substitute for some of the written work? If you say to yourself, boy, the student's doing this because they get a lot of attention, first thing to try is provide attention for all the other behaviors you want, the positive ones they display, and minimize your attention to the disruptive behavior. They like attention, so they're going to naturally gravitate to displaying the behaviors that are going to provide them with the highest rate or the most attention. If they appear to be having challenging behaviors, to gain access to a preferred item or activity, think about how you can make it available to them, the same activity or item, if it's acceptable to you, but based on the behaviors you want. So you could establish a little written contract with them that specifies positive behaviors that the student needs to display to gain access to the item or the activity. With automatic or sensory seeking behaviors, key to remember, it's really the person's doing it because there's something enjoyable or pleasurable. Doesn't relate to how other people, either you or the other students in the classroom, respond to them. So first of all, ask yourself if it's a coping mechanism. If it is, can you allow it? And by allowing it, is it not, can you minimize the disruption of the classroom? If it's disruptive from your perspective or interferes with your instruction, what are appropriate alternatives? So if a child paces a lot in a repetitive manner, can you give them more breaks? Can they go for a walk between classroom activities? And that, having access to the ability to move freely may reduce the likelihood that they engage in the repetitive behaviors. For some individuals, these basic interventions may not be enough. And in that case, what we recommend is that you consult with somebody who has expertise in the assessment and treatment of challenging behaviors, so that you receive the level of support you need to help the student and to make sure that they are not disruptive to the classroom experience.